The body will be covered by leaves and brush, but not buried.
Is it clothed?
No, it isn't.
Is it intact?
No, it isn't.
Okay.
I'll tell
us
you
more about that.
Okay, yes, the head will be missing.
I'm taking this script from a book I'd been working on a few years back, but never finished, called The Scars That Mark the Trail, which covered every murder that has taken place along the Appalachian Trail. This case focuses on one such murder, but unfortunately, does not end there. He described himself as a sociopath, influenced by society and his military training, who was set off by a strong sense of victimization. He claimed to have started hunting in September of 2007. January 1st, 2008, Meredith Hope Emerson, a 24-year-old graduate of the University of Georgia, leaves a note for her roommate, Julia, at around 11 a.m. as she leaves their apartment in Buford. Meredith, her boyfriend Steve, Julia, and several other friends had celebrated New Year's Eve out on the town the night before. Meredith had planned to spend New Year's Day with Steve, but the unseasonably mild weather, with the temperature hovering in the mid-50s and the sun shining brightly, spurs her toward a nearby trail she loves hiking with her dog. At about noon, Meredith and her beautiful black Labrador, Ella, step onto the approach trail and begin making their way up Blood Mountain, the tallest peak on Georgia's stretch of the Appalachian Trail. Along the way, they encounter a man who appears to be in his 60s, hiking with a reddish golden retriever. Meredith chats sporadically with the older man as the quartet moves along the trail together for a time. Her natural pace soon becomes too much for the older man, and he drops behind as she and Ella continue up the mountain. On their descent a bit later, Meredith steps off of the trail to feed Ella from a collapsible bowl that she always has with her on these hikes. She is soon surprised when the same older man, now without his dog, suddenly emerges from the woods wielding a military-style knife and a tactical police baton. Cutting off her path back to the trail, the man demands that she turn over her ATM card. Almost in a single motion, Meredith refuses, drops Ella's leash, and lunges daringly for the knife. The older man could not have known that Meredith, a petite but athletic 5'4", 120-pound young woman, was a blue belt in judo, with an innate instinct that would not allow her to be resigned to passive victimization. A full-on fight breaks out right there beside the trail. While yelling to alert anyone within earshot to the situation, Meredith is able to relieve the wiry man of his knife. She's nearly gotten the best of him, but is partially subdued when he strikes her with a police baton. He follows up by punching her several times, injuring his hand in the process of swelling both of her eyes and possibly breaking her nose. Just when it appears that Meredith has been worn into submission, she digs deep and engages him physically again. The man strikes her a few more times and begins attempting to calm her by assuring her that he only wants her ATM card and PIN number. When this doesn't work well enough, he tells her that he has a gun. The man, now somewhat in control of Meredith, ties a rope around her neck like a leash and drags her into the woods. An agitated and confused Ella follows as Meredith is led reluctantly into thick brush, through a steep ravine, over a drainage ditch, and across a mountain stream before finally arriving at a white van in a secluded area of the parking lot. The man forces Meredith into the van, and again, Ella follows. The nefarious older man that Meredith had encountered on her peaceful New Year's Day hike was a 61-year-old drifter by the name of Gary Michael Hilton. Born on November 22, 1946, to parents who would soon divorce, Gary was taken to Florida with his mother at the age of 8. While attending school there and doing quite well scholastically, his mother remarried, and Gary was soon accompanying her and his new stepfather as they roamed the country in search of work. At age 9, Gary suffered a traumatic head injury when a Murphy bed fell and struck him, resulting in a frontal lobe injury and a wound that would require 200 stitches to close. After the incident, Gary's behavior changed. He became more aggressive and difficult to control. He'd already been a hyperactive child, and much more troublingly, he'd maintained a constant fascination with death, destruction, guns, and war from as far back as he could remember. His brain injury, perhaps, served to intensify and accelerate what was already a troubled and violent mind. Though forced to spend time with his stepfather, Gary would never warm to him. In fact, their relationship would eventually become noxious. As a side note here, it likely didn't help matters that his mother, not long after divorcing Gary's natural father, would speak with him about the importance of her giving his stepfather good orgasms. This, as well as much else that I'm sure he was exposed to, would help to warp any developing mind. Anyway, after years of tumult between the two, Gary, at age 14, shot his stepfather during an argument with a gun he'd borrowed from a friend. His stepfather survived the shooting injury, and deciding to give Gary a second chance, did not press charges. Gary saw a psychologist for a year or so following the incident. He was diagnosed at that time as suffering from a sociopathic character disorder. It was also around this time that his obsession with violent sexual fantasies gained a strong hold on him. Gary joined the Army when he was 18. He served as a paratrooper while stationed in Germany and later attended airborne school back in Florida. During this time, he began hearing voices and suffered a psychotic break. He was admitted to a military hospital and medicated for a time before being honorably discharged from the service in 1967. He was 21 at the time. In the years that followed, Gary would attempt to live a normal life, marrying 3 times, with each marriage ultimately failing. He was arrested for minor offenses such as theft and simple battery, but did not serve any significant stretch of time in prison. After wandering about the southern states and trying his hand at multiple jobs for 2 decades, Gary, then 44, ended up in Atlanta, Georgia, where he found steady work with a siding company called Insulated Wall Systems. His employer, John Tabor, also allowed Gary to rent one of the properties that he owned. During this period, Gary was prescribed Ritalin by a doctor, though he did not suffer from attention deficit disorder, and soon began abusing the drug. Though he claimed the pills made him feel great, even, quote, bulletproof, his behavior was proving antithetical and quickly became problematic. He was short-tempered, confrontational, and often threatening, which would lead to the eventual loss of both his job and his home. Gary actually threatened to harm his boss's family if John didn't give him $3,000. He confronted John in the driveway of his home, demanding the money. John ran for the house and retrieved a gun, which caused Gary to flee back into the woods where he'd been lurking as he waited for John to exit his house. With no prospects for employment or housing, Gary Hilton gravitated naturally to the sanctity of the wilderness. He had long maintained a passion for the outdoors, and this was certainly a fitting time for him to indulge. He and his dog Dandy headed north in his white 2001 Chevrolet Astro van to the Pisgah National Forest in North Carolina. Hikers on Blood Mountain noticed the extremely disturbed state of the trail where Meredith and Hilton had tussled prior to her kidnapping. A man named Bill Clausen had seen Meredith at the approach trail with Ella on the morning of January 1st. He had also seen her hiking beside Hilton and his dog on his way back down the trail. Later, Lawson would again see Hilton, this time watching him from within the woods while attempting not to be seen. When Lawson spotted him, Hilton turned calmly and walked away, disappearing into the trees. Another man named Seth Blankenship locates some discarded belongings in the immediate area, including a water bottle, a bag of dog treats, a collapsible dog bowl, sunglasses, a hair beret, and a tactical police baton. It is very clear to everyone who passes this area of the trail that something violent had happened there. January 2nd, 2008. Meredith Emerson's roommate, Julia, notices that she and Ella have not yet returned to the apartment. Shortly thereafter, Meredith's boss calls to inquire as to why she's not yet shown up for work. Julia, growing concerned, contacts Meredith's parents, Susan and David Emerson, to inform them that she's not heard from Meredith since finding her note now more than a day earlier. The weather had become harsh through the previous night, with temperatures dropping below zero and snow accumulating in the area. After speaking with the Emersons, Peggy Bailey, a friend of the family and Georgia native, contacts law enforcement to report Meredith as missing. Julia searches the apartment for anything that might give her an idea as to where Meredith had gone hiking the previous day. She finds some hiking guides and notes the trails that Meredith had highlighted. She then rounds up several friends, including Meredith's boyfriend Steve, and heads up to the mountain to look for her. When they arrive at the parking lot, situated at the base of Blood Mountain, they see Meredith's snow-covered car sitting there and immediately rush up the hiking trail. After searching for their friend well into the evening hours in freezing temperatures and coming up empty, they call the police. Because Blood Mountain is located within the Chattahoochee National Forest, U.S. Forestry Service rangers are brought in on the immediate search effort set to launch the following morning. In the early hours of January 3rd, the parking lot and approach trail are closed off as a law enforcement command station is established in nearby Vogel State Park. The official search for Meredith Emerson begins as teams make their way up the mountain. Hundreds of volunteers show up and offer to assist, many of whom are Appalachian trail hikers who've caught wind of a missing person in the area. Efforts are focused at this time on the 5-square-mile area surrounding the location of Meredith's car. While the search is in progress, agents from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the GBI, set up a tip line at the sheriff's office. They request emergency tracking on Meredith's account with Wachovia Bank. The bank confirmed that there'd been no activity on the account since December 31st, and they contact Verizon Wireless, from whom they learn that her phone had been cut off between 11 a.m. and 2:40 p.m. on January 1st and remained off. Afternoon television news broadcasts notify the public of Meredith's status as missing and provide photos, basic information, and the police tip line number. Calls immediately begin coming in from people who'd seen her hiking on the trail on January 1st. In addition to reports being received about sightings of Meredith, are reports of a strange man with a reddish dog who'd been seen in Meredith's company on a portion of the trail. At approximately 2 p.m., a call is received on the tip line from John Tabor. Tabor believes he knows the man being described in the news broadcasts, as well as his dog. If Tabor is correct, the man being described is Gary Michael Hilton, who he's known for over 10 years, having once employed and housed the man. Tabor provides the agents with a description of Hilton's vehicle, his license plate number, and informs them that Hilton frequently visited national parks to camp and hike. He adds that he's known Hilton to carry a variety of weapons with him, including a police baton. Within a couple of hours, news broadcasts are now alerting the public to the identification of Gary Michael Hilton as a suspect in Meredith's disappearance and asking anyone who might know him to call the tip line.
Now, here again is the description of the person of interest. Investigators say he's a 60-year-old white man. He's around 5'10" and he weighs about 160 pounds. He has silver gray hair and he might be driving a white minivan. The man's dog is reddish in color and answers to the name of Dandy.
Meredith's parents arrive at Vogel State Park later that afternoon and are set up in a cabin near the law enforcement command station. At this time, there are helicopters and canine units joining the search for their daughter on Blood Mountain. The GBI then receives another call from John Tabor. To his astonishment, after having no contact with him for several years, Hilton had contacted him at about 4:30 p.m., saying he'd gotten his life back on track and wanted to return to work, but that he would need some startup funds. Tabor, not letting on that he knew anything about the current investigation, agreed. Hilton then asked that Tabor leave the money at his business headquarters in Atlanta. Police soon determined that the call to Tabor had been made from a payphone outside a Huddle House restaurant on the Foothills Parkway in Marble Hill, about 60 miles south of Blood Mountain. An officer quickly reports to the location and speaks with a cook who recalls having seen Hilton there. He'd made a call from the business phone at the front counter. The officer then visits a store located across the street and speaks with the manager, who confirms having seen a white Chevrolet Astro van parked beside the payphone in question that afternoon. The DeKalb County SWAT team had been tasked with monitoring John Tabor's business address in Atlanta. If Hilton showed up there in hopes of collecting the money he'd requested from Tabor, they were to apprehend him and immediately search the van for Meredith. Unfortunately, Hilton did not show up. Meredith is not found during the authorities' first day of searching the mountain. Calls continued to come into the tip line, some being from park rangers who recalled having encountered Hilton on December 31st as well as January 1st. They described his behavior as bizarre and rather confrontational. According to some rangers, he'd been known for some time to camp in the forest at the foot of the mountain and was often aggressive. On the morning of January 4th, the U.S. Marshal Service informs GBI agents that they've learned, via a detailed database search, that Meredith's debit card had in fact been used that week. This was contrary to the information they'd received earlier from her bank. 9 attempts had been made to withdraw funds from Georgia ATM machines between January 1st and 2nd. The banks were located 13, 60, and 80 miles from Blood Mountain, respectively. Interestingly, an incorrect PIN number had been entered on each attempt. Agents are now led to believe that Meredith is with Hilton as he travels south, providing him with incorrect PIN numbers as a means of buying herself time for rescue. At about 4 p.m., a tip line call is received from a woman who claims to have found Meredith's dog, Ella, at a Kroger grocery store in Cumming, Georgia, 70 miles south of Blood Mountain. Apparently, the dog had wandered into the store and was roaming the aisles when the woman phoned the police to ask for instruction. A GBI agent reports to the scene, and by 6 p.m. confirms via a microchip implant that it is, in fact, Ella. Several minutes later, a woman named Shawn Stewart calls the tip line to report that Hilton, who she's known for over 20 years, has just called her asking for money. He hung up abruptly when she mentioned the current manhunt in progress for him. Shawn provides the phone number he'd called from, and it's soon traced to a payphone outside of a quick tip store located just across the street from where Ella has been found. Agents rush to the location, where an employee identifies Hilton as the man who'd used the payphone. He claims that Hilton had been cleaning out his van while there, and that he'd thrown some things into a dumpster beside the store. He then left, heading south. Metro Atlanta police departments are notified and told to be on the lookout for the white Chevrolet Astro van as the GBI begins processing the scene at the Quick Trip. Just before 8 p.m., a call comes in to the DeKalb 911 center. A man reports that Hilton is currently cleaning out a white van not far from where he's standing.
DeKalb 911, what's the exact location?
I have this, the person of interest in that missing woman case is at this Chevron gas station on Ashford Dunwoody. The van is here, the dog is here, the red dog, and I saw the man's face, and I've been watching the news, and I know it's him. And he's emptying all this stuff out of his van, taking it all to the trash. It's definitely
And the dumpster is
looking around like he is as guilty as sin. I can go take him down if you want.
No, sir. Stay right there.
Okay.
After a few tense moments, DeKalb County deputies arrive and quickly take Hilton into custody without incident. Unfortunately, Meredith is not in the van. Agents from the GBI then take custody of Hilton and bring him to their Atlanta office. Here, Hilton collapses and lies face down on the floor, refusing to get up.
Mr. Hilton, my name's Clay Bridges. I'm a special agent with the GBI. Would you be more comfortable in the chair?
I can't sit up.
Okay.
I have vertigo.
You have vertigo?
He claims to have multiple sclerosis and says he cannot stand up without medication.
Is that from the multiple sclerosis?
Yes. I'm through talking to you. I'm making those statements. I don't want to be interrogated anymore. They put me back in the handcuff.
Agents Mirandize him, stand him up, and transport him to the Union County Jail. Back at the Quick Trip location, 2 garbage bags are recovered from the dumpster. In the first bag, officers find a black wallet containing Meredith's driver's license, in addition to several other pieces of paperwork bearing her name. The second bag contains a fleece pullover and 2 sweatshirts, covered in dirt, hair, plant debris, and blood, and some men's clothing also covered in blood. It would be difficult, said the lead investigator, to believe that a person could still be alive after losing such an amount of blood. There was so much of it that the clothing could have been wrung out. At the bottom of the bag, they find metal chains, lengths of blood-stained nylon rope, and a citation issued on December 28, 2007 to Gary M. Hilton. The next day, January 5th, the GBI obtains an arrest warrant for Gary Michael Hilton on the charge of kidnapping with bodily harm. Also on this day, they receive a tip line call from a man who claims to have seen Hilton in Dawson Forest at about noon on January 1st. He'd seen the white Chevrolet Astro van backed up against a gate, but there was no one in or around the van at the time. Agents are dispatched to Dawson Forest immediately. When they arrive, they perform a search of the area and find a roll of paper towels and a few dog treats beside a tree. The GBI reviews security photos from the ATM machines where attempts had been made to withdraw money from Meredith's debit account. The photos from the final attempt at Regions Bank in Canton on January 2nd confirm that the man in the images is Hilton, as he'd been wearing the same clothing at the time of his arrest. Hilton's van had been taken to the GBI's main investigative office for search and processing following the arrest. Bloodstains are found in several locations, including the passenger side sliding door, on paper towels found in the vehicle, and on the rear of the driver's seat in a form that is consistent with a blood-hair transfer. On January 6th, the search on Blood Mountain is coming to a close. Efforts will now be directed to Dawson Forest, where proof has been found of Hilton's presence not long after he'd left Blood Mountain on January 1st. The Emersons, having recently been reunited with Ella, will be leaving Vogel State Park and staying with their local friends, the Baileys. GBI agents reach out to the Union County Prosecutor's Office to confirm that Hilton will be represented by a public defender and that someone will be questioning him as soon as humanly possible as to Meredith's whereabouts. Law enforcement echoes the collective sentiment of the public when demanding to know where she is. A public defender meets with Hilton later that day and interviews him for several hours. Afterwards, the public defender asks the GBI to contact the prosecutor's office and present them with an offer. If they take the death penalty off the table, Hilton will lead them to Meredith Emerson. The next day, after discussing the arrangement with the Emersons, the prosecutor formally agrees to the deal. On January 7th, agents from the GBI, the county prosecutor, and the public defender meet with Gary Hilton at the Union County Jail. Hilton tells them that Meredith is in Dawson Forest, then absurdly begins talking about how nice it is there. Once redirected, he provides detailed directions to her location. A landmark near the spot will be where 2 hiking trails meet, one trail marked with lavender blazes and the other with gray ones, he says. She will be about 40 yards from there, covered with leaves and brush, but not buried. When asked if Meredith is wrapped in anything and if she is clothed, Hilton replies in the negative to both questions. When asked if the body will be intact, he replies no, the head will be missing. He informs all present that he'd chosen to decapitate Meredith for strictly forensic reasons, before he then provides them with separate directions to the young woman's head.
I mean, is that difficult to do, to take somebody's head off? I've never seen that done. I mean,
all you got to do is keep sewing,
Right.
sewing, and then get through the joint. It's just like you would, that's what it's made for in the kitchen,
Right.
to cut up meat.
Right, okay.
As the interview ends, Hilton apologizes to the officers for how, quote, wrenching cases like this must be for them to deal with. Then he adds laughingly, but that's your damn job. When Hilton forced Meredith into his van at the base of Blood Mountain on January 1st, he binds her tightly with nylon rope, chains her to the chassis of the van, and drives away with her ATM card in hand. Over the next 3.5 days, he keeps her prisoner as he moves south, attempting to withdraw money from her account at ATM machines across Georgia. Meredith is able to buy herself 3 days of possible rescue opportunity by providing Hilton with a different incorrect PIN number on each occasion.
or 5 times. She kept trying to convince you that it would work.
Oh, she did convince me.
Right.
She ran me back. I'd go try it like an idiot.
And it didn't work.
None of it did. She's still telling me it's gonna work. It's gonna work. Must be at the wrong bank.
She would pay for her ingenuity, though, as Hilton would her on more than one occasion, justifying the acts by claiming that she owed him for running him all over the state with fake PIN numbers and putting mileage on his van. On his final day with Meredith, Hilton backs his van into a spot he'd previously scouted in Dawson Forest. He tells her that she's going home, then drags her from the vehicle. As Meredith is already bound with rope, Hilton easily secures her to a tree with chains before retreating to the van, leaving her alone in the forest as he, quote, collects himself. He casually enjoys a cup of coffee before returning to Meredith. He claims that she said, "I was afraid you weren't coming back," upon seeing him again. Hilton then walks behind her and begins striking her violently and repeatedly on the head with the handle of a car jack, stopping only after he is certain that she has stopped breathing. He undresses her, pours bleach all over her body to destroy DNA, then proceeds to behead her with a kitchen bread knife. He hides her head about a half-mile from her body, both of which are very well concealed with the surrounding brush. Hilton would later say that he could not bring himself to kill Meredith's dog, Ella. As to Meredith herself, he tells GBI agents, though he never intended to let her go as he would then be identified, that she enjoyed her time with him. He believed that he had the ability to comfort his victim, to put her at ease. He claimed that she was unrestrained about 90% of the time she was with him, only being tied up during transit, that she would joke with him, and that he gave her books to read.
I gave her a book to read and everything else there, and I walked up and made as if to unsecure the chain, struck her with the bar.
What bar?
It was a jack handle.
He said that the experience of killing Meredith, which was something he believed he had to do, was, quote, surreal.
I just wanted to expose everything to the elements,
right,
rather than keep them back. I poured liquid bleach all over her to any DNA, and I knew bleach would not destroy fibers, but that any DNA she may have picked up from my clothes. She'd been wearing my clothes for now, 3 days.
Was this difficult for you at all? As far as take her life? Was it difficult at all?
He claimed to have felt disgusted when he did it, the beating as well as the subsequent beheading. It was hard, he added. You gotta remember, we had spent several good days together. GBI agents leave the jail for Dawson Forest, with Hilton being transported in a separate vehicle behind them. It's already dark by the time they arrive at approximately 6:45 p.m. With Hilton waiting in the vehicle, it takes only about 15 minutes of following the directions he provided for an agent to locate the body of Meredith Emerson in the very state in which he'd described. A blood-stained kitchen knife with a broken blade is also found at the scene. By about 7:30, the agents make their way to the second scene. Hilton accompanies them for this more meticulous portion of the search. He leads them through the woods and up over a bank where they come upon tennis shoes and a bloody fleece. Hilton then points to a log with a pile of leaves beside it. Here, agents locate Meredith's head. As the scene is being processed, a GBI agent contacts the Emersons to inform them of what has happened, so that there could be no chance of them learning of it on the news. By midnight, the coroner has officially taken custody of Meredith's remains. At daybreak, the crime scene will be thoroughly searched and processed by the GBI. A memorial is held for Meredith in Athens, Georgia on January 11th. Her family is joined by hundreds at the church that morning, many of whom wear green, Meredith's favorite color. One of her cousins reads from a note as she stands before the gathered, quote, I don't think Meredith would want any of us to be permanently embittered by what happened. I think she would want us to see the light in the darkness. Unable to finish reading the note through her sobs, Susan Emerson steps to the podium, herself choking back tears, as she says, quote, we see Meredith's light in all of you, and we know that it far outweighs all of the darkness that has invaded our lives. Meredith Emerson was a positive, confident, and outgoing young woman who was always ready and willing to help others. She denied these attributes to no one. A close friend of hers said that if you knew her for only a few minutes, you knew the real Meredith. The Emersons, with Ella in tow, leave Georgia the following morning for Colorado. Meredith's former roommate, Julia, and a nonprofit organization called Right to Hike would go on to support the creation of a scholarship fund in Meredith's name. The scholarship would allow students at the University of Georgia to travel abroad to France as she had once done. Right to Hike also held fundraisers to support hiking safety and for the installation of emergency phone units to make the trails safer. Each October in Atlanta, the group sponsors Ella's Run, the setting for which is a trail that Meredith used to love hiking with her ever-present canine companion. Tragically, the story of Gary Michael Hilton's lawlessness had only begun with his arrest for the brutal murder he'd committed in Georgia. Prior to the arrest being made in the Meredith Emerson case, GBI agents were notified as to several active cases that might possibly involve the man they were currently investigating. Agents then began putting together a timeline of Hilton's travels over the past several years. When Hilton was living in his van in the refuge of North Carolina's Pisgah National Forest in late 2007, he had just begun to hunt, as he would later put it. On October 20th, he spotted his first viable targets. From the time they left their car at the trailhead, he stalked them from the woods. They were an elderly couple out on a hike on one of the forest trails. John Bryant, a man who had once thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail, meaning he'd hiked the entire 2,200 miles between Georgia and Maine, and his wife Irene. Married for 55 years, the Bryants were both in their 80s. As he watched them from the cover of the woods, Hilton decided to break a self-imposed rule: no couples, as he believed the two murders would generate too much publicity. He was broke, running out of Ritalin, and had been living out of a campground dumpster for weeks, so he made an exception. When he decided to, quote, hunt that day, he'd committed to, quote, taking the first person that showed up. It could have been anyone, but now it was John and Irene Bryant in his crosshairs. Hilton approaches them on the trail and insists that he's going to take their ATM card and go withdraw some money. John brushes him off and keeps moving up the trail. Hilton then whips his baton out and strikes John on the back of the knee with it. John then spins around and attempts to fight back with his hiking stick. Hilton swings the baton again and strikes him in the side of the head before pulling out a small can of pepper spray and misting John's face with it. John falls to the ground, unable to see. Irene then steps forward and stabs Hilton in the chest with the base of her hiking stick. He brushes the stick aside and strikes her in the head with the baton. With both of his elderly victims now subdued, Hilton walks them back to his van in the nearby parking area. He tosses John in, but Irene refuses to follow. Hilton approaches her and proceeds to beat her mercilessly with the baton. Her blood sprayed everywhere, he said, and into his eyes, turning his vision red as he beat her to death right there beside the van. He then drags her deeper into the woods and covers her body with brush. After taking John's ATM card and forcing him to provide the PIN number, Hilton holds him captive in his van as he drives to an ATM machine at a bank about 75 miles from where he had killed Irene. Disguising his face with a makeshift mask made of white duct tape, Hilton withdraws $300. He then takes John to Nantahala National Forest and walks him into the woods. John attempts to run, but falls down an embankment and breaks his arm between two trees. Hilton attempts to stand him up, but is unable to do so. He then pulls out his gun and places the barrel against the side of John's head. He pulls the trigger and watches as the bullet bursts out the other side. Irene's body was found in the forest about 3 weeks later, her skull fractured in several places. John, however, seemed to have vanished. His skeletal remains would not be found until well after Hilton's arrest for the Emerson murder. Tragically, a 911 call had been made at one point from the Bryants' shared cell phone, likely when they were being taken to Hilton's van. but the call dropped due to poor signal strength. After the Bryant slayings, Hilton left North Carolina and made his way south through Georgia. For a period of about a month, he camped in various national parks and forests as he progressed into Florida. In November, he settled in the Apalachicola National Forest near Tallahassee. On December 1st, 2007, while Hilton was living in his van and roaming the Apalachicola landscape, a woman disappeared there. 46-year-old nurse and mother, Cheryl Dunlap, was reported missing to Leon County law enforcement when she did not show up for the Sunday school class she taught at the Christian River of Life Church, then subsequently failed to report to work on December 3rd. Her car was located on Crawfordville Highway, not far from an entrance to the Leon Sinks geological area of the forest. The left rear tire had been punctured, leading investigators to believe that she had likely gotten a flat on the road and pulled over with the hope of finding assistance. A few days later, security camera footage of a man wearing gloves, glasses, and a rubber mask while attempting to withdraw money from an ATM with Cheryl's debit card was forwarded to law enforcement. Her card had been used at several local banks between December 2nd and 4th. These bank locations were staked out by police for several days, but the man did not return. On December 15th, Apalachicola Forest Rangers received a report from a hunter of buzzards circling in a specific area of the woods. Upon inspection, the Rangers located the body of a woman whose legs had been mutilated and whose head and hands had been removed. The body was identified using a portion of the thigh muscle as Cheryl Dunlap. Gary Hilton, having made his way to Florida and run out of money, was again hungry and would again go on the hunt. He spotted Cheryl walking on a trail and covered himself with a mosquito net as camouflage before following her from within the woods. It would be the same MO. He kidnapped her and held her captive in his van for days while using her ATM card to withdraw a total of $700 from various banks in the area. Cheryl was chained to the van, as well as being chained to trees while Hilton was hiding out deep in the woods. She, like Meredith Emerson, was also raped by Hilton. Finally, he gathered her belongings and told her that he was going to release her that day. As part of a procedure that she had sadly become accustomed to by this point, Hilton had her put chains around her own ankles in order to be chained to a tree. As she was doing so on this occasion, he pulled his gun from his fanny pack and shot her in the back of the head. He then dismembered and burned her body. Hilton took perverse pleasure, he would later state, in terrifying and haunting the members of Cheryl's church as they learned of and had to live with the news of her violent death. She did, however, leave him with something that shook him, I suppose as much as you can shake a psychopath. She said that before Hilton himself dies, to ask Jesus to forgive him for what he's done. Rattled only in the moment, Hilton remained remorseless for the taking of Cheryl's life. A day later, reports of a man camping off of a trail in the Osceola National Forest, adjacent to Apalachicola, reached Forest Service rangers. When they located Gary, obviously unaware of his recent crimes, they issued him a simple citation for camping in an unsanctioned area and driving on a closed road before instructing him to leave. Gary Michael Hilton then fled to Georgia as Florida authorities searched for clues as to the disappearance of Cheryl Dunlap. Unfortunately, they had very little in the way of leads. Hilton just may have gotten away with this murder had he not again had the urge to kill a month later on Blood Mountain. Gary Hilton would be tried for murder in 3 states, beginning with Georgia. The attorney that had agreed not to seek the death penalty in exchange for Hilton's disclosure of the location of Meredith Emerson's remains was now unsure about following through. A deal was eventually reached, however, on January 31st of 2008, and Hilton was indicted in Dawson County Superior Court on the charge of first-degree murder. Wearing a bulletproof vest in the courtroom as he had throughout all proceedings, Hilton delivered his guilty plea. Prior to sentencing, each of the victims' parents were permitted to read a prepared statement before the court. Susan Emerson read first. "I'm not sorry the death penalty was taken off the table. That would have been an easy out. Let him stay alive and slowly rot. God may choose to forgive him, however, he is not worth the time and energy it would take for me to do so. My focus will remain on all the good Meredith stood for and still does." Dave Emerson followed. "My daughter was a shining light in our lives, and now we are left with a hole in our hearts that will not heal. I feel no punishment is too severe for Mr. Hilton. Only pray that he suffers immensely for his heinous acts and that his fellow inmates recognize his evil and malevolence for mankind and treat him with appropriate measures.
I sentence you to spend the remainder of your natural life in prison. It is the intention of the court that you never receive parole."
Florida, having been forwarded a significant portion of the evidence that the GBI had collected for their case, would have their opportunity to try the convicted killer next. In February of 2008, Hilton was indicted in Tallahassee for the murder of Cheryl Dunlap. He remained unapologetic during the proceedings and mentioned outside of the courtroom that his only regret was getting caught. Blood found at the scene of Cheryl's death proved to be a match for samples taken from Hilton's van, and Hilton's knife was proven to be the instrument used to flatten the tire on Cheryl's car. Florida prosecutors chose to seek the death penalty, and after 4 years of protracted motions and hearings, Hilton finally stood to be judged by a jury of his peers in February of 2011. His trial lasted 4 weeks, and in the end, he was convicted of first-degree murder. Death by lethal injection was his sentence. In June of 2011, a federal grand jury in the Western District of North Carolina indicted Hilton for the 2007 kidnapping, robbery, and murder of John Bryant in the Nantahala National Forest. Hilton also confessed to killing Irene in the Pisgah National Forest and pled guilty to all charges.
He beat my mother to death. He shot my father in the head. He murdered 2 people for no reason other than the trophies of their clothes and the $300 he got from their bank card.
For his crimes in their state, the North Carolina court sentenced Hilton to 4 consecutive life sentences in federal prison, without the possibility of parole. When given the chance to speak at his sentencing hearing, Hilton said quite unconvincingly, quote, "Your Honor, I do have remorse. I am sorry." As he was escorted from the courtroom, however, he winked at one of the GBI agents that had apprehended him in the Meredith Emerson case. Gary Michael Hilton has resided on death row in Florida at the Union Correctional Institution since April of 2011. He is believed by many to have committed additional murders but has never been charged in the cases. These include the unsolved murder cases of Rosanna Miliani, who disappeared while hiking in Bryson City, North Carolina in 2005, Michael Scott Lewis, whose decapitated and dismembered corpse was found within the Tomoka State Park near Ormond Beach, Florida in 2007, and Patrice Andres, whose remains were located in Cumming, Georgia, not too far from where Meredith Emerson was killed. The investigation into the Rosanna Miliani case did produce cause for attention. On the day of her disappearance, she had been seen in a local thrift store in the company of an older man. The man seemed to be guarding her, and Rosanna was said to have been acting as though she was being controlled. The man mentioned to the store clerk that he was a preacher who traveled between campgrounds to spread the word of the Lord. The clerk, later shown a photograph of Gary Hilton, was certain that he was the man in the store with Rosanna that day. It was confirmed by law enforcement that Hilton had been in the area during this time, and that Rosanna had gone missing very close to where John Bryant's body would later be located. Rosanna Miliani has never been found, and curiously, there have been no other leads in the case.
Listen, the description I got was he was 50 to 60 years old. Okay, not only that, she was a hiker, I was a big-time hiker. She disappeared during a hiking trip under some circumstances. My victim were all taken in the woods. Okay, it all fits together. But listen, it fits me, but it wasn't me. Okay, I've got to admit, I wasn't much of a serial killer. Okay, I should have had a long career, and I should have killed lots of people. And I just, I mean, it's embarrassing.
How many were there?
4. 2 brides. There was Meredith Emerson and Cheryl Dunlap down here. That was it.
And beyond this case, it is also curious that 2 unknown DNA samples were found in Hilton's van during the Emerson investigation. Though it's quite difficult to believe that Gary Hilton simply decided to begin hunting and murdering people at the age of 61, he remained staunch in his denials as to his involvement with any other case. In a case that captures national attention, and with a serial killer like Gary Michael Hilton, there are bound to be a couple of interesting footnotes worthy of mention. Here are a couple of them in this case. A writer on assignment for Hustler magazine made an open records request with the GBI for the crime scene photos of Meredith Emerson. The man claimed to be writing a true crime article on the case, and that he would be using the photos to, quote, double-check if what the killer told police is true, to see if his MO fits in with other crimes he's charged with, and to see if there are similarities and/or differences compared to other unsolved murders. This request, the source it was coming from, and the explanation provided sat right with no one. The GBI denied the request, and its agents voiced their concerns about such requests being permitted in the first place. Over the next few weeks, legislation was drafted that would block the future release of such graphic images, and on March 29, 2010, the Meredith Emerson Memorial Privacy Act was signed into law. Three days after the murder of Meredith Emerson, an attorney named Samuel Rael met with Hilton while in custody to ask that he cooperate with the prosecutor and the GBI in disclosing the location of Meredith Emerson's body. Rael had actually met Hilton in the mid-'80s when he was hired to represent him on a charge of trespassing on city property. They had become friends over the years while Rael defended Hilton on a number of occasions for charges such as arson and false solicitation of charitable donations, etc. Rael saw Hilton as, quote, a really interesting guy with a screw loose. In 1995, Rael decided to follow a passion of his and ventured into the business of movie making. According to Rael, this was his friend Gary Hilton's movie pitch. A killer lurks in the woods. Some beautiful women are let out into those woods where the killer hunts them like prey. Filmed in the North Georgia mountains, only about 20 miles south of Blood Mountain, and released that same year, the straight-to-video movie was called Deadly Run. In it, a psychotic man holds women captive in a remote cabin, releases them into the forest, and hunts and kills them. On board as a consultant while he was living in a storage space in Atlanta, Hilton scouted locations, was involved in casting, and collaborated with Rael during the entire process of making the movie. Rael openly admitted that his friend, Gary Michael Hilton, was a criminal and perhaps a sociopath, but, quote, he was a happy one and an animated one. After Meredith Emerson's murder, Rael commented on all the similarities to their movie, saying, quote, to me, it's almost word for word. That's what's really scary about it. Gary Michael Hilton claimed that he killed no one before the age of 61. He claimed to have multiple sclerosis, to have no way of working for a living, to have a distaste for killing, and to have been good to all of his victims prior to taking their lives. His claims, however, have never matched up with the realities of his existence. He admitted to many things that he actually didn't believe, that he was an abject failure, that the reality of murder wasn't anything like the fantasies he'd had, that he was an intelligent criminal, and that he was a societal victim. He was a monument to contradiction, and a man with no coping skills that lived beyond the reach of logic, help, and hope. He was a man who loved hearing himself speak and believed that what he said was impactful, though it was not. He had a short attention span, and he went on conversational tangents that no one ever followed. He exhibited antisocial traits from an early age, and they remain with him to this day. He tried constantly to manipulate people, relishing any control that he could assume over others. He progressed into violent activity, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. His hatred of the world, and for people, particularly women, was worn on his sleeve. He frightened people. He followed women and stared at them intensely. All who encountered the creepy man who mumbled to himself incessantly knew that something was deeply wrong with him. They saw and felt his darkness, and they knew that he didn't fit in. He couldn't hide what he was, which is why he truly befriended only animals and sought the solitude of the wilderness. The cocktail of Hilton believing himself to be a victim, his anger and lack of coping skills, his fascination with death and weapons, the trauma he'd experienced as a child, etc., all created a man who, once over the edge, would never return. Hilton, who'd been dubbed the National Forest serial killer, said that he preferred the moniker the Beast of Blood Mountain. He enjoyed his status as a feared murderer. In a moment of feigned sincerity, he stated that the murder of Meredith Emerson was the one that, quote, got to him. Her age, her promise, the kind of person she was, he had taken all of it from her, and he claimed that this bothered him. He would become noticeably upset, however, when people hinted that Meredith Emerson, a very petite young woman, nearly got the best of him both physically and mentally. His hatred of women, a deep hatred because they had all the advantages in life yet were greedy and heartless, as he put it, would not allow his inflated ego to accept this idea. Interestingly, it was the victim whose murder, quote, got to him, who also exposed him. She was the victim who truly fought him, the one who shocked him with her speed and aggression, the one who remained alive in his company for more than 3 days, the one who eventually got the Beast of Blood Mountain caught, and he did not fight when he was caught, because she never stopped fighting him. Thank you for listening.
I believe he is nothing more than a bully and a weak-minded coward who preys on others. He fancies himself a survivalist, while anyone can see he's a scared little man on the run. He's the fool who goes through life too ignorant to realize he is a fool, and Meredith has exposed him.